Well, hello, I'm Dr. Michael Edwards, and welcome to our 2021 webinar series. Uh, this one is all about increasing the profitability of your practice. It may or may not be something you thought about in the past. I know when you're in dental school, at least the first 2 years, your purpose is clear. It's just learn the material, fulfill the requirements, pass the boards. But as you move into the third and fourth years, you begin to develop a philosophy of care, of how you see yourself in the future in your own practice. How you're going to treat people. If you're an associate, or maybe you work at a corporation, you're doing the same thing. You're thinking about when I own my own practice, possibly. If you're on this webinar, you probably are. But you're building an ethos, a philosophy of care, aspirations of what you want to create in the future and how you want to treat people. I remember when I was in dental school, everybody wanted to do cosmetic dentistry, have a state-of-the-art dental office with great technology, and then we were all going to retire at 55. Freedom, baby. We're going to move to the villages. We're going to get up every morning and kick off the day, the all-day party with a no-sweat workout, then drive our golf carts to the pub, spend the rest of the day playing golf or bridge, sipping on mocktails and Mai Tais, and enjoying the evening with your pals and calling out to passerbys. Sounds nice. But this is about freedom. You can do whatever you want to do. When we're developing these philosophies, we're never really thinking about ourselves at this early age. When we're in dental school, we have no experience in running a practice, no experience of the real world very often. We need to have some type of certainty as we move forward. But when we get too certain, when things are too predictable, we want a little variety. So we also want some uncertainty. We want to be significant. We want to have connection with others. We want to have personal growth. And finally, we want to contribute to society. These are the 6 basic human needs. And they only grow in significance as we get older, very often, especially if they're not being met. So this is what so many of us said. We're going to focus on health and prevention and spend time with our patients. And then we get out of school. 40% of dentists report high or extremely high stress levels. Is it any wonder? You get out of school, maybe you hire a supply rep to help you start your practice. And of course, they have your best interest at heart, right? And then there's insurances. And I'm not talking about dental insurances. I'm talking about malpractice, life, disability, workman's comp, business owners' policies for property, general liability, hazard, business interruption insurance, employment practices liability, practice overhead coverage, and finally, data breach coverage. Wow. I remember the insurance salesman meeting with me so often those first few months of owning this practice. And I got to know him so well, I finally asked him, "Are you manicuring your fingernails? Because they're just amazing." He goes, "Yes, I do, because people see my fingers all day. I pass the pen across the table like this." That's how often we saw the guy. We had so many insurances. And that's before we even get employees. Now we have employees, so we need payroll, benefits, vacation days, holiday pay, personal time. And you know, this industry's dominated by women. You're going to have pregnancy leave. And then the loan payments start. And what about taxes? You got to save for taxes, quarterly taxes, employment taxes. Quickly, there's nothing left for retirement. The villages gets pushed further and further off. That freedom thing is going to have to be put on hold. And you know, worst case scenario, you'll just work an extra year or two, right? So most dentists turn to the gurus in dental economics, right? They should know what to do. They've got economics in their name. So what do they tell us? They say decrease expenses, increase production. Just lower your expenses. It's always the famous advice. You know, if you knew how, you probably would have done it. So sure, you can join buying clubs and shave off a percentage or two, but wholesale change is what's needed to really trim away expenses and increase profit. But you also need to grow as well. That's the other advice, increase production. And everybody has advice on how to do that. You know, production is just such a warm and fuzzy word, isn't it? I never even knew That's what it was called when I was in dental school. I remember my first associateship when he told me about my production goal. I go, "What are you talking about production?" And they laughed. I mean, there's 4 types of production. You've got units of production. There's batch type production. There's mass production. And then there's continuous or process production. Wouldn't you love to be a patient in a practice and that's what everything, the focus of everything was production? But anyway, everybody has these ideas on how to increase production. Not that you're going to collect it all, but we want to increase it. So how do we increase production? The typical answer is to build it bigger. This is a very sad story from a doctor who I met with to evaluate a practice. And she said to me, "I really feel like I'm in prison. I hop from supply company to company so I can continue to order. The debt payments have just overtaken me and have become 25% of my collections on $1 million practice. So $1 million a year is not making any money personally, is in debt, and has to move from company to company to continue to order. She can't refi because her credit's bad now. She has collection agencies calling from labs, equipment companies, etc. Doesn't even want to answer the phone. And this all happened in the last year after I built a new office on the advice from a consultant. And this consultant is from a big name company. She said to me, "I have a new CEREC coming and that should reduce my lab bills. Do you think that's a good strategy?" And there, my friends, and yes, this is the Styx album cover, The Grand Illusion. This is the grand illusion, that I can produce my way to a lower overhead, that I can offer more services, and that'll reduce my overhead. CERECs, laser, airway. I'm invited to Zero World every year, and every year they gave me a golden ticket with the hopes that I'll buy their flagship machine, $180,000 last time. It always ends up being an additional 15 grand to install with all the specialists and contractors and nuclear physicists that have to come out. Then there's maintenance contracts afterward I didn't know about, with the promise that I'll do more procedures, diagnose more, and then medical insurance is going to cover it. So if you don't have enough trouble with dental insurance, let's try to submit to medical. That's fun. The only question I have is who's playing at the concert. It's the most expensive concert you ever go to, but it's intimate. It's great. I saw Imagine Dragons. I think they had Katy Perry there one year. But is it any wonder that running a profitable practice and becoming wealthy is such a crapshoot? So here's the truth from the ADA Council on Research on this topic. It doesn't matter if you're a high-performing office or a low-performing office. Your overhead's still above 70%. So, you go do all that. Yes, you grow it bigger. Yes, you increase production. But your overhead didn't go down. It went up. Because you've got loan payments, you've got maintenance contracts, more supplies, ceramic ovens, zirconia ovens. And they always say in the future, we'll just update the software. You don't need to buy another machine. That is a big lie. Right about the time you get it paid off, or maybe year 3.5 or 4, if something doesn't wear out, guess what? Your CPU won't handle the new update. You need a new imaging unit, a new milling unit. You got to go into these things eyes wide open. If it takes you 5 or 6 crowns to pay the loan, which is their famous way of selling things, well, the additional 5 or 6 crowns made the payment for the machine. You didn't make any money on that. There's no profit there. You're just breaking even. These devices will not build your practice. Instead, they put you in a commodity market with corporations and DSOs, like toilet paper. That's a commodity market. You're buying the cheapest one. Yes, there's a little variation. Actually, we do know with toilet paper, there's a variation. But with CEREC crowns in a day, no anesthetic laser procedures, this is easy marketing things. People begin to shop around. Every small to mid-sized town now has an Aspen or Heartland dental care facility nearby or some corporation. They're driving down prices and removing barriers to entry into your dental office. So what do we do? Well, you could take more CE, get more skills, right? Well, from the Institute of Applied Behavioral Science, they've created a learning pyramid that shows in a lecture, you retain about 5% of the material. If there's some audio visual, maybe 20%. If there's some demonstration, like a hands-on demo, maybe 30. If they discuss things in small groups, maybe 50. If you actually have to do something, now you're in the 75 to 80% level. Well, there's a lot of programs out there I hear all the time. People sit sometimes for an entire week in a classroom setting. That's a $10,000 to $15,000 investment, and they're going to retain 20% at best. I talk to these people all the time, and I ask, how much of this have you implemented in your practice? And it's often very little. But what have they done? They've bought new supplies, more expensive supplies, more equipment. What you really get from these things is you're in the presence of greatness, which is really cool. You get to rub elbows with a lot of great dentists, and the people who run the programs are big names in dentistry. You get to form a community with your colleagues. You're getting a t-shirt. You could say, I've been there. And for some, that's what it's all about. But if you're on this webinar, I know you want more. You want results. You want to increase your success. You want to increase your ability to transform your practice and the lives of your patients. Deep learning is hard work, and the effort involved in active learning is often misinterpreted as a sign of poor learning. And this is from a 2019 study from the National Academy of Science. A superstar lecturer can explain things in a way to make you feel like you learn more than you actually do. And that's where you get the warm and fuzzies from attending these programs. But they will not build your practice. We've got one more thing that is standing in the way of us getting to profitability. And that's the elephant in the room: dental insurance. You see, you can produce all you want, but if you're the insurance in an insurance network, you need to produce significantly more, because you're going to be writing off 30 to 50%, sometimes more on many procedures. And if you're not, your fees are probably too low. I document this in my book, Through the Red Sea. But when I called to cancel Delta Dental due to excessive write-offs, they gave me 3 strategies they were recommending. And they said dentists all over are adopting these strategies so they can continue to take Delta. The first one was have your hygienist see 3 to 4 people an hour. And I just thought, how would that even work? I mean, we have to do it. Dental fitness charting, which if you're not familiar is I'll call it a perio charting for the purpose of this webinar. It's not, but that's what I'll call it for you. If you're not familiar. But we're assessing the patient's health. Then we're having a conversation with them about what it is that they want. We're building a strategy with them for them to get it. We're building a master plan for them to get what it is they want, to find out. The hygienist is finding out what's important to them and how to individualize her treatment to that person's specific needs. That's tough to do, 3 or 4 an hour. So I said, how are we supposed to do that? She said, well, have your assistant bring the patient back, grab all the necessary x-rays, review the medical history, do oral hygiene instruction. The hygienist comes in, scrapes the teeth. The assistant then polishes the teeth and applies fluoride. Now, I know some hygienists do this, but I've never had one in my employ that would go from room to room and just scale without even knowing anything about the patient. But this was adopted by a lot of practices to stay in Delta, to get that $1,500 a year. I said I wasn't going to do it. So she said, well, you could see 3 to 4 people an hour. And I said, well, how would that work? And she said, well, you would drill the teeth and you would hire an assistant to fill the teeth. And I remember when expanded functions started, and I interviewed several expanded functions assistants. I was probably in my mid-30s, maybe late 30s when that started. And I remember them coming in and everything was pretty much a flowable composite that self-leveled, and that was it. There was very little anatomy. And I never saw one do a great job. Now I know there are some that do. I have one that works for me now that does an excellent job, but that's not how we practice. This is an individualized health-based practice, and I do all the work. There's no way I could see 3 to 4 people an hour. So this was not a game starter for me. Finally, she said, "This is our most popular, doctor. Significantly raise your fees, like 20%, so that people who don't have insurance will compensate for the ones that do. So screw everybody else so we could stay in Delta and get your $1,500 a year." I remember, like I said, I detailed this in Through the Red Sea. I remember I went and I met with my banker because I told him I was going to drop this insurance and I was concerned and wanted to make sure I had all these things in place before I did it, just to boost my confidence. And I told him about the situation. He goes, "Oh, so they're just going to be in the same boat I am?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I have guardians, so they'll be paying out of pocket just like I do." I go, "Yeah." So we essentially dropped Delta and took everyone's out-of-network benefits, and that allows us to treat everybody the same. You don't know how often I go in an office and I see certain insurance companies or Delta patients treated differently than everybody else because of their insurance. Now, it's not just it's not just all these things that are in the way of us getting profitable. Look at how write-offs affect your practice. There was a famous study done in the 70s that talked about the impact on profit when prices were increased or discounts were given. So this Kodak study was adjusted for dentistry by the Greater St. Louis Dental Society. And they assume that a dental office has a 50% overhead with a 34% doctor's salary and benefits with a 10% profit. Now, that's really generous because as I showed you, the average overhead is in the low 70s to mid 70s. So if you cut your selling price by 2%, that means you need to increase your volume of sales by 25% to make the same profit that you obtained before the price was lowered, if your overhead was 50%. If you took a 5% cut, you'd have to increase 100%. A 7% increase would be 233%, and let's just get down to the 9%, 900% sales increase. This is why it's so hard to become profitable in these insurance networks. It's worse than this because these offices don't have a 50% overhead. And what does insurance make you do? Well, you can't do too many things in the same appointment. So it results in many shorter appointments. The patient's coming in there all the time for 1 or 2 things at a time. The treatment plans have to tailor to the benefits very often. Sometimes you don't even approach things with patients because the first question is it covered by my insurance? Then if you don't know, you have to predetermine it. Now we're waiting a couple months to even get the patient in. And it forces you to see multiple people an hour because the first person you see, you're losing money on. The second one, you're breaking even. The only way to be profitable is to get to the third. So it affects your time. You begin to run ragged in your office. You begin to get beat down and tired of doing these little single appointments. But it's dictated to you by the insurance company. That's why most of dental offices are type 1 or type 2. Type 1 is like a pain relief, like an urgent care, where you have a lot of emergencies. Usually the team's doing most of that work, and there's difficulty doing any long-term treatment planning. A level 2 type office is more problem focused. This is the 95% of dental practices in the country are this. They are insurance-based care, they're hygiene driven, they usually have more than one hygienist. So when you get the practice to be big enough, there's statistically root canals, cracked teeth, failing fillings, that you are always busy. Typically, you're booked out quite a long time. These are fast-paced offices or high-volume offices. So if we just do a quick self-assessment here, just about time utilization. Do you feel like you have a good balance between your work and your family? Do you feel a considerable amount of stress or adrenaline while at work? Do you think about work on the weekends or in the middle of the night? Do you run on time all day? Do your assistants get a full lunch? And does your team leave on time, or are you routinely keeping them late? You see, the top concerns I hear from dentists is that there's not enough profit to save for their future. The practice isn't growing. They want financial peace in their life. The practice is running them and they're stressed. They're writing off so much they don't even want to do some procedures. And actually, they don't even want to see some people. They need more referrals. They're spending a lot of money on advertising, marketing, Google AdWords, trying to get people in. They don't make enough money and they're working harder than ever. And finally, corporate dentistry is taking over in my area, driving down prices. You see, there's a gap in knowledge. We are technically minded people. That's why we think we can solve all our problems by putting our nose to the grindstone, by getting more technical training, by more technology. That's in our wheelhouse, but it doesn't solve our problem. And that's why the Schuster Center exists. We're essentially the Wharton School of Business for dentists. Running your practice for profitability is essential so you can be the type of dentist you want to be and that patients can have the type of experience that you want to give them. And profitability gives you the freedom to do that, to be whatever you want to be. We were never trained to be business owners. We cannot produce our way out of it. So when that doesn't work, what do? We start running reports. We want to know, where's the money going? Well, you might as well, might as well be the way you look at a report. Because half the time we don't know what we're looking at anyway, because we were never trained to look at it. I mean, just looking at this scoreboard, it looks like, okay, somebody's got in the third, there's been 3 wickets and they need 227 runs to win. And the last wicket was 46. What does that even mean? I don't understand how you would even tell who's ahead or behind. And the bowlers are at 11 and 10 in the first inning, I guess. And the overs are at 5 and 6. Whatever. Most people cannot read their reports. This is the most common one. Everybody wants to run a profit and loss. It almost always shows there's profit. It's the most common report to run, but it doesn't tell you everything. Usually debts missing, as well as a lot of other major items. This report is actually considered accounting theory. It's not even actual. Then you have a balance sheet, which is kind of like a net worth statement showing assets and liabilities. So you got to have this one. And then you got to have a cash flow report. It's complicated, doesn't it? Pretty quick. You need all 3 to even see what's happening in a practice. What we need is a scoreboard we could read. This is a basketball scoreboard, by the way. But it's easy to see who's winning, what period you're in, how much time's left. But having numbers are worthless unless you know the rules of the game and what it's supposed to look like. So if you don't know there's 4 periods, period 2 doesn't mean anything to you. So you have to have something to compare it to. What we need is a model of health. We need a model of a healthy dental practice to gauge how we're doing. Now, a model is really just like a picture's worth 1,000 words. We can look at a picture or a model and it tells us everything. It helps us see things more clearly. It makes simplicity out of complex things. We can start with the whole before examining the parts and elements, and then we can know how it all works together. Now, if the model is based on natural laws and principles, and it's in harmony with those, then it will have a complete and whole feel. It is going to feel right. We use models already in dentistry. This is a healthy dentition. The gums are pink in color. They form points between the teeth. There's stippling. The front teeth are longer and larger than the laterals. The canines have their cusp tips, and they have ramps that protect the posterior teeth through all the various excursive movements. Okay? This is a model from the Dawson Academy on the neutral zone. And I love my time at the Dawson Center. I was there for many years and studied with Pete and DeWitt, and I loved it. And it really became the foundation for my practice in the first decade that I was in private practice. But this simplifies a complex model. It says it all without any words at all. One of the places I devote considerable amount of my time is teaching at the OBI Foundation. Here we use 3 principles: stable condylar position, anterior guidance, and natural tooth forms to deliver minimally invasive or full restorative dentistry. For instance, this woman who had been given massive treatment plans by many other doctors, we found a very minimally invasive solution to solve her problem. Or this young woman in her early 30s who had quite a bit of wear. We had a minimally invasive way to restore this mouth. Now, I'm not telling you that, so you go take more technical training, because I already told you not to do that. I show you this to show how a model translates into health and why we need to understand a model. Well, business principles also create a model. Money principles on how to make it, how to keep it, how to invest it, and then finally how to give it. Time principles. With just using some of the time principles we teach at the center, we doubled an office's revenue while keeping the expenses at the same. And we did that in 1 month. And they carried that through for the next quarter, doubling revenue, just using time principles. Organizational principles, using structure to change the behavior of team, of patients, of the way your office runs. People principles, finding out what motivates people, satisfying their human needs. And finally, sales principles. People make choices that are in their best interest, and they do not buy anything if they don't understand that they have a problem. This all goes towards the Schuster model. This is our model, created by Dr. Schuster over 40 years ago. This is based on work by Abraham Maslow into healthy and successful individuals. You see, all models before this were based on dysfunction and disease. This was the first time. Maslow was the first person to say, I'm going to study healthy people and find out what makes them healthy. And this is applied, Dr. Schuster applied that to dentistry. So what this shows is that once a practice gets control over money, using the overhead model, creating profitability, creating cash flow on power accounts, it then frees them up to have time and organization to improve the practice. The practice moves into a quality state rather than quantity. When you do that, you begin to develop relationships with people. You have time to form a collaborative agreement. You have time to master plan together. And at this level, you use all your advanced skills. You begin to grow stewards of your team and get commitment based on shared values. And finally, freedom. Freedom to be fulfilled in what you do, freedom to have a practice that is in line with your values, and to become significant in the life of another, as well as becoming significant in the lives of your team. For over 40 years, this has been the key to transforming practices and lives. If you look back over the last 5 years of your dental practice and the $2 to $6 million or more you've collected, just ask yourself, how much have you spent? How much have you saved? Now, if you want help figuring out your profit currently or would like to see your potential, you're going to be able to drop me a text or email at the end of the webinar, and I or a team member will help you do this. We'll help you figure it out. You see, you generate the same revenue as a pro athlete. The difference is you do it over 30 to 40 years instead of 5. Your career is longer. But most athletes don't retire wealthy. They don't know how to manage money. They often get taken because they don't know who to trust, and they're very generous, and they think the money's going to last forever. In fact, a lot of dentists don't retire with wealth. It's no different than the general population. So if we use a different analogy instead of the pro athlete analogy, if we just think of our practices like an oil well that's consistently giving off revenue for a long period of time, what's it take for us? It takes a sound financial strategy, money principles. It takes good advisors and discipline to create the true freedom in our lives that we want to have. So if we apply the Schuster spending model to an average practice with a revenue of $800,000, $80,000 would be saved for taxes, $70,000 for retirement, $34,000 for personal savings, $416,000 for expenses in the practice, $200,000 for your household expenses. So your little pumper's putting out this much every year. You're going to be able to use the next model, which shows you the percentages of these overhead categories, to figure out what your budgets will be. Just look at your practice over the last 3 years, see what is the typical revenue, what's the trajectory, and then apply this spending model to it. Figure out, what does your overhead need to be? What does your doctor's salary need to be? What would 10% of that going into solvency and ROI, what would that do for you? Now, if the general overhead is in the 70s, like most practices, you don't have the knowledge or skill typically to get it to here. That's what I've been telling you. And every 1% of excess of overhead costs you $666 a month. Over 25 years at 10%, that's just under $900,000. And you're doing this every year. Most practices that I evaluate are buying a Chevy Malibu, brand new Chevy Malibu every month, just in overhead excesses. Isn't that crazy? So let's do a quick personal assessment. Do you know how much it costs to run your practice on a monthly basis? Do you have enough money left over to fully fund retirement? Do you have enough money to do the things you personally want to do? Are you worrying about debt? Are you writing off so much you're becoming bitter about seeing certain patients? And do you pay all the bills or just take what's left over? See, I asked these same questions to a new client during her enrollment phase, and her answers brought a lot of clarity to her situation, who already felt burnt out after only a year in her own office. Let's fast forward 3 months, and this is right at this is her 4th month with us. She went from broke to having brokers. Her beginning overhead was 73% with a monthly revenue of 70 grand. That left $18,900 for doctor's salary, taxes, and loan payments. After 3 months, her overhead's 55%, so she's going in the right direction. Average monthly revenue, $98,600, which leaves a whopping $44,000 left over. That is doubling profit. That's what we're known for. What is your profit potential? If you want to text your name to 636-234-7481, that's my personal cell. I will set up a complimentary strategy session with you and see what we need to do next. Oh, wow. Thank you. One just came in. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. All right. Now, what does profit do? Profit fuels solvency. Profit fuels sharing with the team, so all ships rise as the practice does better. Profit means having more time. It takes the pressure off you. You can spend more time doing what you want to do. Profit fuels your freedom. Freedom now, freedom later. You don't have to wait till the average age a dentist retires is 69.8 years old. You don't have to wait. You can move your freedom date much earlier. Not that you have to stop working, But now you have choice. And when you have choice, everything's sweeter. Profit also empowers you to retake control of the direction of your practice without fear and explore higher levels of being a dentist. You can explore the hybrid practice, where it's a mixture of insurance-based and patients who want to pursue health. See, in a practice like this, you have the problem-focused and pain relief type of practice, still like an engine that's in your practice, throwing off some revenue, allowing you to pursue this other area of interest, this other area or this other form of dentistry, which is the partnership style of practice, where when people come in, it's not just a laundry list of what's wrong, but you're answering questions. Why did this happen? What's the trajectory for the patient? What can I do? What do you need to do? What's the body doing? What are the patient's goals? How do they drive the treatment? What happens if we do nothing and we just let you keep going on like you are? Where does that go? This is what forms collaborative relationships with patients. And when you look at overheads in these types of practices, and here's one now, the staff compensation is right in our model at 20%. Occupancy in this scenario is a little high. H&P, which is equipment, loans, servicing, is very low. Supplies are under our model. Lab is half of our model expense. Marketing is right on the target, and admin services are a little high. So there's probably some advisors there, or maybe a lot of computer support or something. So this gives us a total overhead of 46%. So what happens here? There's an extra 5% that the doctor takes home. How nice is that? But that's typical in a level 3 partnership style practice. A level 4 style practice is, I call it the journey back home, but it's full body healthcare. You tend to have a referral network that you work with. It's multidisciplinary. These are people who are just trying to get back to some semblance of life. They've been very badly damaged. Many times these people have had their mouths reconstructed before, once or twice. They have a lot of failing work. You typically have a lot of health issues. That doctor you would consider that type of practice to be a brain surgeon, very complex care. So this is a very much a one-to-one practice. Hygiene is individualized and takes into account systemic health. People are willing to pay whatever's necessary. They don't count on insurance at all. They make decisions based on their beliefs in your abilities. And you tend to have a small, dedicated team of people. Now, when you look at the model and the profitability in each model, if you have a typical overhead of 75%, you would need $2 million of production to generate $500,000 of profit. At a 50% overhead practice, you need to do half that to generate the same profit. A 75% overhead office tends to have a clinic model and is very high volume. They need a lot of new patients to make it work. Like I hear all the time, 40 to 70 new patients. It's a larger team. There's more stress and more time spent on management. The 50% overhead office, they get all the time they need. It's one patient at a time. It's complete care for fewer people. It's the kind of physician I pay to go to. It's a smaller staff with less stress and less time on management. Ask yourself, where would you want to be seen? Now, which one of these types of practices has the greatest leverage, has the greatest potential to build profit? This is incredible. A level 3 dentist is producing 640% more on 36 fewer patients than a level 1 dentist. A level 4 is producing 1,200% more on 40% fewer patients than a level 1 dentist. So earlier I told you 95% of practices are a fast-paced, transaction-based dental practice. Only 5% are the one-to-one style practices. What happens is, as you move from undifferentiated, basically you're doing the same thing as everybody else. That's a commodity market. As you begin to focus on the experience the patient has in your office, and take into account the needs of the customers. You see, their needs are irrelevant in a commodity market. There's a hole, I fix the hole. There's an abscess, I drain the abscess, I do the root canal. The tooth is cracked or broken, I do the crown. They're out. Max their insurance out, see you next year. A friend of mine was going through a divorce, began working in a DSO style practice. And he said, it was, and this is a highly trained dentist, but he was doing it for the money. He said, I sit in my office, an assistant comes and gets me and says, you're doing a root canal, post and build up, and a crown on 29. And he says, okay. He goes, I walk in, he goes, I am literally doing a root canal on a tooth that's broke off. He goes, I don't know if it even should have been done, but I'm doing a root canal, build up, and a crown. And I had to clean off the calculus. It had green stuff growing on it to do it. It's not about health. It's not about the patient's needs at all. It's a transaction. And it's very unfair to the patient who doesn't even know. When you begin to focus on experiences, people will pay more. They will pay a premium for that experience and to be cared for in that way. When you begin to have a practice that operates in that way, you can cut the strings of the insurance companies. You begin doing more of the work you like to do, and you attract a lot of people that have a higher appreciation for their health and their dentistry. And I'll tell you something else. The people who don't know, who only want what their insurance covers you, it gives them a chance to discover what's going on with them. It gives them the possibility to have a different relationship with you, with dentistry, and with their health. So is it any wonder the doctors think they can produce their way enough that all the problems will go away? After 40 years, I mean, this is what we've seen. Is it any wonder the profit and loss report shows that you made money, but where is it? All this starts to make a lot more sense now. Submitting to medical insurance will increase case acceptance. You can understand why we think this way and why it doesn't work. It's all wrong. The last one, I don't need business training. I can organically change things as I go. It's like changing a flat tire on your car as you go down the highway. I hope I've shown you today the thing you need is not to get more knowledge about dentistry, but get more knowledge about running your business. Because at some point, it's going to end. And there's a lot of myths around retirement, and it's no different for dentistry than it is for the general public. The average Social Security check is $1,500. And just because you're retired doesn't mean you get out of those taxes and other costs. Up to 85% of those benefits will be taxed, as well as other deductions like for Medicare. The earlier you start saving, the easier and cheaper it is to do. What you really get to do is take advantage of something that's been termed the eighth wonder of the world, compound interest. But just like money can grow at an incredible rate with compound interest, it can also cost you the opposite of that if you have too much debt, too many loans. Most people think, well, I can always work an extra year or two. That'll make up for it. You'll never be able to recapture the compounding of interest on money, even if it's a little bit you can put away at a younger age. As you get older, depending on what type of dentistry you do, actually just being a dentist, there are health issues that come up. Carpal tunnel, neck issues, there could be injuries. Economic changes in the profession and disability are possible in your future. And listen, taxes aren't going down. President Biden told us during the election, and he's reiterated it, I'm going to raise your taxes. Don't wait, plan on it. And taxes have to go up. The country's $30 trillion in debt. It's more than what the actual economy is for a year. Somebody's got to pay for all this at some point, and it's going to really start to snowball as time goes on. And taxation is going to spread, as well as the increased cost of fuel, which trickles into everything. As taxes go up, everything goes up. As fuel goes up, food, supplies, anything that needs to be shipped is going to go up. Don't wait, plan on it. But the same goes for your future. Why wait to be truly free? By reaching financial independence, you'll be working a plan that will ensure your future. You won't have to worry about fads or rises and falls in the market. You just start early and make it automatic. And if you didn't start early, start today. How about this one? My practice is my retirement plan. Well, guess what? Unless you keep it up to date, unless it's rocking and rolling to the very end, you won't get as much as you think. Plan on 65% of average revenue for the most recent 3-year period, and that'll give you an idea. If you're using a broker to sell it, that's 10% off the table. And then there's, taxes. Now, there's lots of ways to make a sale and reduce your impact on taxes, and that's covered. I'll talk about that briefly in the future, but we cover that in an upcoming course. But as we move and begin to think about retirement, those 6 human needs really come into focus. These needs don't change as you get older. They become more and more important to you as time marches on and your life on earth marches to an end, that final chapter of life. Because now you really want to live your life on your own terms. Now, these feelings begin to happen around midlife, but they become more and more in focus as you age. What people think, 53% don't even know how much they need for retirement. They haven't even calculated it. That's half. Same for dentists. We're no different. 6% think they need less than 50 grand, and then the practice will make up the rest. 15% think 50 to 100, and 21% think 100 to 250. The truth is, it depends on, the truth is, it depends on your lifestyle. Oh gosh, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. The truth is, it depends on your lifestyle, and you need a minimum of 1.5 million. And that's to cover yourself for the future taxation changes. Depending on your lifestyle, you may need more like 2 to 3 million, ideally 3 to 5 billion. You have to remember the taxes being higher in the future. The country is at 30 million, like I said, that's 10 million more than our national economy. Now, we have one couple spot left in our transitions course, which is really designed for people wanting to make that final transition. We advise you to really begin to make this strategy to make this plan about 15 years before you're ready to retire. But what we're doing is bringing all the experts into one place: the accountant, the broker, the financial advisor, the practice analysis. It's a couples retreat. If you're married, you bring your spouse. And you not only have the plan for the practice and for the money and the tax implications, but you also have a plan for each other and for your life afterward. You are going to write that last chapter instead of just waiting to see what happens. Very often our identity is very much tied up with being the doctor and running the practice, and that stops. So what comes next? So you'll leave this course with a detailed plan, or a very far down the road on creating a plan, and you'll also have trusted advisors to connect with afterward, or to take this plan back to your advisors, then to get to work on it. Now, immediate steps you'd want to do after this webinar is get your most current profit and loss and create a budget based on the spending model I showed you. You have something to compare it with. Set up a solvency account at the bank and begin saving 10% of revenues and live on the rest. And if you can't do 10, do 1 or 2, anything. And finally, set up a call with Chris Ellison. Now, she was one of my coaches when I went through the Schuster Center management program. In 1997. And she's great. And she's a great listener. She can talk to you about your problems. But you could set up a strategy session through her or through me directly. And the Schuster Center is all about helping you achieve your full potential and creating freedom. I want to thank you for being here today. Best of luck.